The chipped ceramic mug warmed Elias's hands, a familiar comfort against the persistent bite of the autumn morning chill. The strong black tea, brewed the way his mother always had, bitter and potent, did little to dispel the cold that had settled deep within him. He sat on the back porch swing, its rhythmic creak a mournful counterpoint to the dry rustling of fallen leaves. Weak sunlight struggled through the bare branches of the apple tree, casting long, fractured shadows. A lone robin hopped across the damp grass. Elias watched it with detached curiosity. The air carried the scent of wet earth and distant wood smoke. His father would have been in his cluttered shed. Inside, Aunt Martha moved with a quiet efficiency. She had arrived 3 days ago, her presence a soft, steady hum. He glanced at the empty space beside him. His mother, her knitted shawl. He could almost feel her hand. Next door, Mrs. Henderson wrestled a leaf-filled wheelbarrow. Her terrier yapped. Leaves spilled. Elias watched, a faint smile. Mrs. Henderson, a constant on their street. He finished his tea. The sun climbed. He should go in. Grief held him. A blue jay cried from the feeder. Elias envied its simple focus. He pushed himself up. The porch felt colder. He went inside. The house was quiet. Dishes clinked. The radio murmured. Aunt Martha wiped the counter, his mother's floral apron. "Morning, dear," she said softly. "Morning. Did you sleep all right?" He shrugged. "As well as can be expected." She nodded. "Toast. Your mother's jam." The jam's sweet scent almost buckled him. "Sunday mornings." He swallowed hard. "Thanks." He sat at the kitchen table. Sunlight showed dust motes. He spread the jam slowly. Aunt Martha moved quietly. She hummed. He watched her. Now, she was a steady presence. Silence stretched, heavy. He ate slowly. Later, Aunt Martha suggested a walk. Just for some fresh air. The street was quiet. Mr. Abernathy swept his porch. "Morning, Martha." "Elias." "Thinking of you." Aunt Martha smiled. Elias nodded. They walked towards the park. Leaves crunched. The park was mostly deserted. A lone figure sat on a bench. Mrs. Gable, the librarian. Her book was closed. Her shoulders shook. Aunt Martha gently steered him there. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Gable looked up, eyes red. "Oh, Martha." "Elias. Your parents. I'm so sorry." The simple words brought a fresh wave of grief. Aunt Martha sat beside her. "It's been difficult." Mrs. Gable nodded. "Lovely people. Your mother's recommendations. Your father's kind words." Silence. Ducks quacked. A young mother passed with a stroller. "Life's unfair," Mrs. Gable whispered. "Such good people, gone." Aunt Martha squeezed her shoulder. "We have to keep going." Elias stared at the pond. Their laughter, their warmth. A world without them. They stayed a while. Mrs. Gable eventually left. The sky clouded over on their walk back. The leaves looked muted. Back home, Aunt Martha did chores. Elias wandered. His father's armchair, the faint scent of pipe tobacco. His mother's figurines. He picked up a photo. His parents smiling. A sharp pang. A different world. A black car arrived. Mr. Davies, the lawyer. He spoke quietly with Aunt Martha. Elias sat in the kitchen, a knot of unease. The will, cold and impersonal. After Mr. Davies left, Aunt Martha found him. Her face was troubled. "That was about the arrangements," she said softly. "And Daniel, his stepbrother." The name hung heavy, distant, shadowy. The twisted wreckage. Blue lights. The officer's flat voice. The other driver. Daniel Hayes. His breath caught. He had known, deep down. "The accident," he began, his voice trembling. Aunt Martha nodded. "Police investigation, ongoing." Daniel was driving. The world tilted. His brother? Responsible? How is that possible? He whispered. Aunt Martha sighed. "We don't know. He was in the area. Visiting someone, not them." Grief, confusion, a cold anger at the unknown brother. "Where is he?" Elias asked, voice tight. "Police, spoken with him. Injured, not as severely." Silence in the kitchen. The clock ticked. Elias stared at the gray sky. His parents gone. His brother responsible. Grief tangled with bitter anger, betrayal. The future shadowed. His past shattered. The slow rhythm broken. Nothing would ever be the same. The following morning dawned gray and oppressive, mirroring the heavy weight that settled upon Elias's chest with the first stirrings of consciousness. The rain from the previous afternoon had ceased, leaving behind a world washed clean but somehow colder, the bare branches of the trees glistening with a damp sheen. He lay in bed, staring at the familiar cracks in the ceiling plaster, each fissure a roadmap of the house's long history, a history that now felt irrevocably severed from his own future. The silence in the house was profound, a stark contrast to the comforting sounds of his parents' morning routine that had once filled these rooms. He eventually rose, the simple act requiring a monumental effort of will. The house felt hollow, each room an echo chamber of memories. He found Aunt Martha in the kitchen, already preparing breakfast, her movements quiet and efficient. The smell of frying bacon, a scent that used to fill him with a sense of comforting normalcy, now felt strangely alien. "Morning, dear," she said softly, her eyes holding a deep well of unspoken sympathy. "Morning," he replied, his voice still rough with sleep and unshed tears. They ate in silence, the clinking of cutlery against plates the only sound. The newspaper lay unopened on the table, the headlines likely filled with the mundane affairs of a world that seemed impossibly distant. Elias found himself unable to focus, his mind a swirling vortex of grief and the unsettling revelation about Daniel. After breakfast, Aunt Martha suggested they go through some of his parents' belongings. "Just a little at a time, dear," she'd said gently. "When you feel ready." He hadn't felt ready, but he knew it was a task that couldn't be avoided forever. They started in his father's study, a room that had always felt like his personal sanctuary. The air still held the faint scent of pipe tobacco and old leather-bound books. Dust motes danced in the weak light filtering through the window, illuminating the countless objects that spoke of his father's passions, his collection of antique maps, his well-worn chess set, the framed photographs of family and friends that adorned every surface. As they carefully sorted through papers and mementos, small, forgotten details of his father's life resurfaced. A faded letter from a long-lost friend, a pressed flower tucked inside a book of poetry, a child's drawing carefully preserved in a manila folder. Each object was a tiny pinprick of memory, sharp and poignant. In his mother's sewing room, the atmosphere was different, filled with the soft scent of lavender and the tactile comfort of fabrics. Spools of thread in every imaginable color sat neatly arranged in wooden boxes, half-finished sewing projects lay draped over mannequins, and patterns were stacked in labeled drawers. Each item spoke of her creativity, her meticulousness, her love for creating beauty with her own hands. As they sifted through her belongings, Aunt Martha quietly shared stories, small anecdotes that Elias had either forgotten or never known. A memory of his mother's infectious laughter during a family picnic, her quiet determination when faced with a challenge, her unwavering kindness towards everyone she met. These small glimpses into his parents' lives, seen through the lens of Aunt Martha's memories, were both comforting and heartbreaking. The task was slow and emotionally draining. By the afternoon, Elias felt utterly exhausted, the weight of grief compounded by the tangible presence of his parents' absence in every object they touched. They stopped for tea, the silence between them heavy with unspoken emotions. Later that day, a detective called, requesting to speak with Elias. The conversation was brief and formal, the detective's voice polite but detached. He asked a few questions about Elias's relationship with Daniel, about Daniel's recent whereabouts, about any contact they might have had. Elias answered truthfully, his responses clipped and devoid of emotion. He barely knew Daniel, their relationship strained and distant for as long as he could remember. The call left him feeling cold and unsettled, a stark reminder of the ongoing investigation, the legal machinery that was slowly grinding forward. The reality of Daniel's involvement in the accident, the fact that his own brother was responsible for their parents' deaths, felt surreal and incomprehensible. As the days continued to bleed into one another, a heavy, oppressive silence settled over the house. Aunt Martha continued her quiet ministrations, her presence a steady, unwavering comfort. Elias moved through the days in a fog of grief, the world around him feeling muted and distant. Sleep offered little respite, his nights filled with fragmented nightmares and the lingering echoes of the accident. One afternoon, while Aunt Martha was out grocery shopping, Elias found himself drawn to the attic. It was a space he hadn't visited in years, a dusty repository of forgotten memories. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and dried leaves. Sunlight filtered weakly through the small, grimy window, casting long, eerie shadows. He moved slowly through the cluttered space, his footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floorboards. Cardboard boxes filled with old photographs, forgotten toys, and moth-eaten clothes lined the walls. In a dark corner, beneath a tattered sheet, he found an old wooden chest. Curiosity piqued, he lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed linens and dried flowers, he found a collection of old letters, tied together with faded ribbon. He carefully untied the ribbon and began to read, his heart pounding in his chest. The letters were addressed to his mother, written in a familiar, looping script. They were from Daniel. As he read, a different picture of his stepbrother began to emerge, a picture far removed from the distant, almost hostile figure he remembered. The letters spoke of loneliness, of a yearning for connection, of a deep regret for the distance that had grown between him and his family. They hinted at struggles, at a life lived on the fringes. One letter, written just a few weeks before the accident, spoke of a desire to return, to mend the broken bridges. A chilling premonition seemed to run through the words, a sense of unease, a feeling that time was running out. Elias sat there in the dusty attic, the weight of the letters heavy in his hands, a new layer of complexity added to his grief. The anger he had felt towards Daniel began to waver, replaced by a confusing mix of sorrow and a dawning sense of understanding. The brother he barely knew was not simply the cause of their tragedy, but a figure shrouded in his own pain and regret. The path ahead, already clouded by grief, now seemed even more uncertain, the simple narrative of blame dissolving into a more complex and unsettling reality. The slow, deliberate unfolding of his life had taken another unexpected turn, leading him down a path he could not yet foresee. And that's where we'll leave things for today. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next part.